Rick Grenell is former spokesperson for 4 U.S. ambassadors to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. Rick, I'm glad you're along tonight.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, if you had to describe what you've read in terms of what you've been able to see so far in this draft report, how would you describe it?
Well, the first most shocking thing is Doug Franz from the State Department saying that it's willful ignorance to think that there are still remaining questions on Benghazi. That's offensive, and I know Doug, and Doug needs to be told that it's not willful ignorance when we find out through this report that top State Department officials weren't even interviewed. Hey, Doug, guess what? Secretary of State Hillary Clinton wasn't interviewed. How is it willful ignorance to suggest that we have serious questions about Benghazi and what happened when no one has been punished? This Accountability Review Board was neither a review and no one has been held accountable. It's outrageous. And for Doug Franz from the State Department to say that it's willful ignorance for us to raise questions about it, I think that someone needs to haul Doug in front of a committee and ask, what's so willfully ignorant about asking why wasn't Hillary Clinton or Tom Nides, her deputy, or Pat Kennedy, why weren't these people interviewed aggressively, and why didn't we use subpoena power to get to the bottom of it? This Accountability Review Board has been a joke from the beginning. We've known it. This report shows it.
I want to point out, you mentioned Undersecretary for Management Patrick Kennedy, and in fact, he's mentioned in this draft report. It says specifically, it points to the authorization by Kennedy to continue operating the ad hoc compound in Benghazi, to let the situation, the operations go on. You know, Mr. Kennedy, how do you account for the fact that he hasn't been talked with? Is he important to sit down with?
He's very important to sit down with. Let me tell you, I know Pat Kennedy and I know him well. I've served with him for a number of years. There is no possible way that Pat Kennedy made this decision without talking to someone higher up. He either talked to Secretary Clinton or he talked to Tom Nides. I will stake my life on it. I know Pat Kennedy. He did not make this decision alone. That's not how Pat Kennedy operates. So someone needs to bring him in and say, Ambassador Kennedy, who told you to continue the operation? Because he did not make that decision on his own.
And I want to make it clear, continue the operation after it had already been determined that they needed more security at our consulate in Benghazi. And also on the list of people, and I know you know these people, the Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, Jeffrey Feltman, and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the fact that they had the ability, the authority now, I'm reading through this draft report, to sit those people down and conduct depositions, but chose to do not individual interviews, but group interviews. Why is that significant?
It's really significant because they know what was going on. They know the process that Ambassador Stevens was asking for increased security, that others were saying that the situation is getting unsafe and we need to have more help. So the process before the decision was made is really key. Let me say one other thing. There's a classified computer on every single person's desk at the State Department. It's separate from the normal computer. When you open a cable, like the cable that Ambassador Stevens sent asking for more security, anyone who opens that specific email, it's recorded. We know exactly who looked at these cables. We can tell who the highest ranking official was. Someone in Congress needs to say, let me see the record of who opened these cables so I know who read them and who then passed on information to others, because someone is taking the fall here. Ambassador Kennedy needs to talk.
That seems pretty basic. I want to remind everybody of where we were in talking with Secretary of State then, Hillary Clinton, and what she had to say about this, just to kind of replay the tape so people kind of know how we got to this point and why the investigation into this has been looked at so carefully by the Oversight Committee. Let's take a look.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator.
Rick, as you remember, some people had a visceral reaction to those words. It doesn't matter. What are your thoughts now as we go forward? Because this report is going to roll out in the next few days, 100 pages of it. We're going to get to see more. It was put together by GOP staffers, but this is a bipartisan committee.
Well, as Secretary Clinton just said in that clip, that we have to do everything we can to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I would agree with her. That means making sure that the policy, which is governed by those who make the policy, the higher-ups, we need to review that process to understand who made the decision so that we know it won't ever happen again. There are a lot of people, Harris, who knew what was going on, and other people were taking the fall. You have to remember that we threw the blame on some mid-level staffers for a while, but now they're back at their job doing something else. So no one has been punished. Basically what Doug Franz and the State Department is saying that is, we are ignorant because we are worried that this situation hasn't been resolved. We don't know that it won't happen again, and we would like to get to the bottom of it so that it doesn't happen again, as Secretary of Clinton has said.
And to put this into context, you know, it was just a few weeks ago that we had on alert and had emptied out the better part of many embassies in the North Africa and Middle Eastern region. So we know our embassies and consulates are under threat. Rick Grenell, and it brings even more importance to getting to the bottom of what happened in Benghazi. We appreciate your time and your perspective tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.